welcome. Thank you everyone for tuning in. My name is Diana Delgado, and I am the literary director here at the University of Arizona Poetry Center. We are here to celebrate Torrin Greathouse, who was our 2020 Summer Residency Program awardee, but unfortunately, due to the many complications that we've had over the past 2 years, we have not been able to host them at the Poetry Center. But what we did want to do was to celebrate the great work that they are doing in poetry, which was chosen by the 2020 Summer Residency Judge, Sam Sachs. And Sam said many great things about Torrin's work, and we're excited because we'll be able to get to hear Torrin's work firsthand. Just a few things about the summer residency program. We're hoping to begin that again in 2023 as best as we can. But just a little bit about the Poetry Center is that the Poetry Center, was founded in 1994 at the University of Arizona. And we've been offering poets the opportunity to spend 2 weeks in Tucson in the summer to focus on their writing. Residents are housed in the Poetry Center studio apartment, which is located just steps away from the center's renowned library of contemporary poetry. Residents also receive a stipend, and they give a public reading in the Poetry Center's reading and lecture series, which has been ongoing since 1962. I mentioned this, but just in case anybody's interested in applying, the residency is offered annually between late June and August. Now I have the honor of introducing Torrin. Torrin A. Greathouse is a transgender cripple-punk and MFA candidate at the University of Minnesota. Her work is published in Poetry, Ploughshares, New England Review, and the Kenyon Review. They have received fellowships from the National Endowment for the Arts, awesome, the Effing Foundation for Sex Positivity, Zoeglossia, and the University of Arizona Poetry Center. She is the author of Wound from the Mouth of a Wound, Milkweed Editions, published in 2020, selected for the Ballard Spahr Prize for Poetry by Aimee Nezhukumatathil. Everyone, Torrin Greathouse, welcome.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Deanna. First off, I want to thank you for organizing this reading. It's been a really weird season, and I'm so happy to be able to join folks, even digitally, to kind of show off the work that I've done as part of this. I also want to thank Sam Sachs for selecting my work, and the University of Arizona Poetry Center for that affirmation of my work and all of the support they've given. I'm going to open up with one of the poems I applied with, and this poem is after Sam Sachs. Obad beginning in handcuffs. Sometimes I pronounce Obad, obeyed, for the way this particular desire stumbles the tongue. Hunger's vocabulary is a fickle thing. How many lovers have said that they adore me, but meant instead they saw in me a door, a thing to be open. Language shifts an image like the light. To lash can mean both beat and bind. I'm lashed against the bed by dawn's red blaze, the whole room welted tidy by the sky between the blinds. To cuff can also mean to hold or harm, each word doubled body and a body's shadow I want, and all at once I flicker beneath you. I beg you to bruise me, and so exchange faggot for fruit. Oh, how gentle lust alters the body, conjugates prey into prayer. The history of handcuffs is old as myth, if memory serves. The legend goes, a Greek hero invented them to steal prophecy from the mouth of a shapeshifter god, and the story gathered blood from there. The root of the word religion is a Latin verb meaning to bind, as in the worshiper is bound to their God, two hands paired in steel, or prayer When I say obey, I mean, I've chosen the softer side of every verb, dulled the sharp edge of a memory sea glass against my tongue. For the first time, when the handcuffed steel lips unkiss my wrists, as morning stains every surface, a fading bruise, I am already free as the first breath after confession.
Wow.
This next poem, and most of the poems I'm going to be reading are written for the manuscript I just finished as part of my MFA. It's my thesis manuscript and hopefully my second book. And then at the end, I'll read 2 new poems that are kind of from something I'm beginning to think about working on. This next poem is a sestina from the current collection. It's blood that makes men hard. The question, who is blood, makes this a threat. Set the scene. First act, men catcall me daily, even behind a mask. I'm raw red meat, something to soften, beat until the blood throbs inside of them. No, I won't let this be the answer. No man's lust is dangerous enough to stitch a thread of fear through my blood. It's comical, the way that these men act. One messages me, says he wants to beat despite his profile, which reads mask for mask. Gay men treat trans girls no better than any common straggler. They all beatify us till they don't. I'm always a saint or a threat, always more fetish than attraction. My body's edges bleed like ink, like skin, beadwork of rubies, dry blood, a necklace of rusty pearls. The night masks a man who follows me and Jay for blocks, shouts slurs, we act like we can't hear. The street is busy, but no one helps. Every day is another threat. This violence comes on cue, on beat. A man beats off to me, tells me to slit my wrists, to drain my blood in the bathroom sink, my beauty a threat to the sugar glass of his masculinity. Men like him, I know, desire me in the dark, in public, react as if their hunger doesn't exist. It's all an act. They play out beat by beat by beating. I'd be lying if I said no man ever battered out my blood to prove himself razor straight. Tired masquerade that's always threatening collapse. I won't act my part, won't spill my blood for a poem. Beat, tableau, audiences, mascara, streaming. This is not a poem. It's a cut thread.
Wow.
This manuscript deals primarily with kind of explorations of desire, the politics of desirability, and the way that these things intersect with violence, either interpersonal or the violence of the state against disabled and trans bodies. This next poem carries an epigraph from a dear friend of mine, and I think is one of the weirder poems in the book, but it's one I dearly love. The title, when translated from Latin, means vanity of all vanity. Vanitas vanitatum. The aesthetics of come are also its politics. Bradley Trumfield. I was called a pansy before I was ever called a faggot, flower child, wilted wrist, the Bradford pear, Pyrus coloriana is a deciduous tree common throughout North America. It blossoms in early spring, branches bursting into 5-petaled pale white flowers. It is an invasive species that covers half the country. Seeds spread on the wind, not unlike disease. Some scientists have even described its spread as an epidemic. The trees are best known for their smell when they bloom. I remember the spring air, thick and familiar scent of cum bitter in my mouth. Perhaps the cum shot is a vanity, liquid flower crown. And aren't there also people who would call my lust invasive, an epidemic? 1930, the Hays Code enforced a strict set of moral guidelines on American film. Most notably, if someone within the film performs an immoral act, they must be punished on screen. I wonder which of my body's verbs might be deemed immoral. The first time I held a boy on my tongue, I held him like a petal. In Rebel Without a Cause, Plato, a queer-coded teen enamored with the protagonist, is shot by police. He dies holding a gun with no bullets inside. Sometimes I forget that to be is also a verb. For years, I've been obsessed with poisonous plant example. Every part of the foxglove is deadly, though most of all the root. As a child, I chewed its petals bitter and splayed in the grass. I didn't know it was poison, only the way it tore through my body. 22 years later, Salmoneo, the actor who portrayed Plato, was stabbed to death in West Hollywood. Sometimes I dream of a world without metaphor. The first time I saw another queer person on film, I watched him die, watched a straight man act out the trial where he fought for a job lost because of desire and the virus that would end his life. Every time a lover comes inside me, I feel fear pulse, a poison in my chest. Yes, I am ashamed of this. Flowers. When that first boy asked me how his cum tasted, I said, it tastes like flowers. Sometimes I think straight people only want to read poems about faggots fucking if there's the risk of someone dying in the end. Sin and its suitable punishment. Hays Code's ugly ghost. How many ways can I metaphor semen into something with sharper edges? Digitalis, cracked thermometer, cut onions, bitter milk. Is the cum shot a memento mori? I refuse to perish where the poem ends. There's a joke here about tiny deaths, but I'm not going to tell it. I just want to be fucked like I'll live forever.
Wow, what an end. That's
It's one of my favorite.
I
It feels
love
very much
it.
like my Lana Del Rey moment.
I love it. I mean, it's also just the way that the poem sort of just continues to expand and expand until the ending sort of even expands it further. I just wanted to say that. It's great. Love it.
Okay, I think there's 2 more poems from this book and then 2 from the new
That's
project.
great.
Is that
Yeah.
good time?
Yeah, no, yeah. Take your time. I want to hear more.
All right. This next poem is a burning high bun. The burning high bun is a form of my own invention. For folks who don't know, a high bun is a traditional Japanese haikai form. It is a prose poem followed by a haiku, which acts as a capstone of it. The burning high bun adds erasure into this. So it's a prose poem, an erasure of the prose poem, and an erasure of the first erasure down into a haiku. Looks a little bit like this. My mouth is the mouth of a river. Language is a slick-tongued thing. How you can say thirst and mean instead desire, but hasn't language always led the mouth back to what fills it? Between the teeth, there is a dozen paths to every meat. Do you follow? I can say the oldest profession and mean that I've made a living in the currency of hunger, a career of making my body into water, that I have heard so many names moaned in my ear, and none of them are mine. I suck a man's cock and it tastes of copper. He comes until empty, and I feel coins clinking inside me. My body laments no guilt, except for my mother's shame, though she does not know. At night, I've pulled their memories up like pills lodged in my throat, which my body will not spasm away. Each false name I have been fed, rising on the crook of my finger, damp and dissolving a palmful of luminous silk. Men are selfish with the truth, but each is clever as a cleaver. See, every name hinges on the J, Jeff, Jack, James, a simple sidestep from a name known best as client and baptismal. There are at least 100 words for how I have survived, and so many of their names lead back to water. Call me Siren, nymph of the pavement. We were taught desire is a flame, but it is instead a river. When I was starving, I opened my mouth and said, drink. Language is a slick and mean desire. Between the teeth, there's a profession in the currency of hunger, a career of making a man's empty coins inside my body. Lament for my mother's shame I've lodged in my throat, false name I've been fed on, my damp and luminous self. See, every name hinges on the simple sidestep, how I have survived their desires' flame. There's currency in empty men. I fed myself on their desire.
I just wanted two things that stuck out to me. Well, one thing, the career of making my body into water. And that's like a refrain where you talk about this idea of this career. But I just love that men are selfish with the truth. I mean, I can't dispute that, you know? It's great. Great work.
And this next poem actually recently came out in Ninth Letter
I
as the
love
winner
that.
of the Ninth Letter Literary Prize for
Oh,
Poetry,
congrats.
chosen by the incredible Tommy Blunt.
Mm.
And this is the opening poem of the new collection. The name of it comes from a term originating actually on Craigslist, where for connections, there is, M for F, male for female, etc., etc. And the phrase T for T is trans person seeking another trans person. T for T. There is no known root for how the word come came to mean what it does. But imagine if you could stitch a lineage back to the Latin come, meaning to step, hence movement, hence a destination, the body moving, perhaps dancing. toward a kind of end, vanishing point of flesh, trembling tongue, fucked apocalyptic, apocalypsis, a veil shifted, and what awaits beneath. A rose, by any other given name, still draw blood if it wanted. But shit. Turns out there's no emoji for a rubber dick sat heavy on the tongue. Go figure. I can still feel it twitch, hold you in my mouth, spit slick apocrypha, sweet faggot magic, the way we speak organs out of their Christian names. Lick cock to clit, bruise breast to flatten chest, bury knuckles inside a wet new anatomy, sucked finger shudder. Lust hot alchemy, holy, how even the air becomes wind when moving, holy, how you fuck me by my one unburied name. And when I tell you how beautiful you are, you riot laughter, kiss me and call me a dyke. Your smile arrives, day bright, unburdens the slur of all its blood. And these are two poems from the more recent project, which is kind of dealing with the Central Valley of California, where I partially grew up, as an early site for the ecological devastation that we're seeing now across the entire continent. And the way that this very much formed like sort of the landscape of my coming of age. Anthropocene anxiety disorder. Our whole world is burning, and I am terrified by the mundaneness of it all. The scent of smoke, a season of its own. Sometimes I mistake the breeze passing through my hair for the soft approach of flame. A poem has no allegiance to the truth. And even as I tell it, I fear you won't believe. Last summer, paradise burned. Every newspaper ran the same photo. McDonald's golden arches swaddled in flame. Forgive me. I was, for a moment, glad to see my stepfather's home vanish. I did not think of the dead. Watched Snapchats of the freeway medians, their camisoles of smoke, and remembered 5 summers before, waking in a fire's path, the strange calm in our truck's cab, the campsite flickering orange in the rear view. Do you think that we'll survive long enough for this to read as fiction? There are cameras floating in space turned inward that will outlive us. The Arctic smolders in their lenses' eye. And I wonder if this is the last monument man will build, large enough for God to notice. Still life of Central Valley with riverbed and hypodermic needle. Under the bridge, a city of blue, tarps ripples like a child imagines water. The snow flutters down like dove feathers. Burnt moths coats their azure waves like sea foam. A perfect pastoral. I'm sorry. This is a lie. It never snows here. But the image is so much prettier if I don't say ash. Don't mention the plastic bags filled with chemical flakes. No matter how I cut this story, there's always powder gathered off-white at the hem of a mouth. No matter which version I choose to tell you, this image could still kill me. Late fall, the foothills are ablaze, and each river is wedding dressed in steam. But under every bridge in this city, the winter arrived years ago. It's never left. Here, the distance between a sleeping bag and body bag reduces down to just temperature and chemistry. I won't tell you about the nights spent there, buying, selling, half sleeping, while a cement heaven bent above me under the weight of passing headlights, illuminating a field of fluorescent bottles, syringes, like stretched out stars. Down here, each depressed plunger is a broken, damn, empty concept of a home, a man-made flood. Beneath the skin, blue rivers twist, a needle plunged beneath the surface spills synthetic joy. Pond of ripples, frozen mid-wave. All the fish choke on the sudden heavy of their gills pollution, a sharp glint hooked in the throat. The rivers brittle and collapse, lips cracked and needle blissed. A friend sleeps in the arroyo's ash-flecked dust and will not wake. Fresno River, an open grave. I've only seen this river flow 3 times. A sudden mud gray thunder, the color of rats after rain. It spilled from every gutter, drenched lawns, flooded streets, and returned each sacrifice we had given. Clots gathering, an exodus back to the heart. Car tires, green-tipped syringes, pocket change, condom wrappers, bullet casings, rusted bike chains, and snapped skateboards. A family, dogs' bones wrapped in so much white plastic you could almost mistake them for a child's ghost. Thank you.
Thank you. Torrin, that was beautiful. And the range and the scope and just the energy of the work that comes from you, the poet, into the work is just palpable. So I just want to thank you for sharing both work that was submitted and then also work that's upcoming. I'd like to ask you a few questions about the newer work. You mentioned that you have a second manuscript that you're actively working toward. And I wondered if you have a title for that manuscript or a tentative title, the titles that you're floating around,
I do. The current title on this manuscript, which I'm very much hoping stays, is Deed.
Uh-huh. I like that. The one word title.
It's a difficult art. I'm somewhat dubious of them most of the time.
Yeah, me too. But it says so much to just, do the one word title. But that's great. I had a question that is more maybe a comment, and maybe we can like talk a little bit about it. I am really inspired by the way that you write about sex and intimacy, and how violence sometimes can often play a part in those two things, how they're separate together, right? And I wondered if that's something that comes very easy for you, or for other people that might be trying to incorporate some of those aspects of into their writing, like what do you think about that?
I think sex is a really, really hard thing to write about. And I think anyone who's ever been to an open mic knows just how easy it is for someone to do it badly. There's always that one guy.
Yeah.
But I think a big thing for me is most of my poems that are about sex are also not really about sex.
Yeah.
And I think there has to be necessarily something more than sex in the poems. Just like writing a poem about joy that is only about joy is so, so difficult to do. I mean, even Ross Gay, who I think is thought of as like the poet of joy in our current canon, you really dig into those poems and most of them are about many, many things other than joy.
Yeah.
But joy becomes the thing that kind of allows those poems to move through themselves.
Uh-huh.
And I often, I think sex connects to so many things in how we move in the world. Desire and the politics of desirability often move beyond the bedroom, right?
Yeah.
There's a really fantastic study on the failings of empathy, and I think it's referenced in the book Against Empathy.
Mm.
Um, so as an autistic writer, I think a lot about the way that we talk about writing toward empathy. As someone who doesn't actually experience a lot of empathy, I
Mm.
think one, we often misname empathy
Mhm.
when we really mean compassion. And also, I think there are some failings. So one of the things that I think is hilarious is among the different things that come into statistics around how we experience empathy is people are more likely to experience empathy for people of the same gender, race, socioeconomic class. These things, if we look at our culture, are all pretty easy to understand, just like on how society has structured itself and like the hegemony created through like white cis heteropatriarchy. But studies also show that people experience less empathy for people they aren't attracted to.
Mm.
And this thought kept returning as I was trying to write about a kind of politics of desirability, because the way that my body is, like a disabled trans woman's body, is encountered by a politic of desirability very easily shades over into the kind of disposability politic that people extend onto disabled bodies, and particularly trans feminine bodies.
Mhm.
Um, so I don't think I can write about desire without also writing about violence, without writing about the way in which my body is made to be disposable by both the state and individuals. And I also can't write about desire without wanting to write into the people who don't make me feel disposable, the
Mm.
ways in which desire can be a positive thing, and how that's often an extension of community. Sorry,
Mm.
that was a very long
Oh,
answer.
but that's what we're looking for, is the long answers, because that's what it takes. These sorts of thoughts and considerations are the things that go into crafting. I hate the word craft, but because that's not really, but just sort of in just in sort of in birthing, or that's not also not a, but just in the creation, or being close to the truth, and being able to bring all those ideas and thoughts and synthesize them in a way where they are being presented to someone in a way where you're reading one thing, but you're reading about all these other things. And I think that that's part of the comment that I made earlier about like the way that your poems expand. And because we can't see the poems on the page, how are your poems normally on the page? Or like the poems, that last poem that you read, what does that look like on the page? Do you have that?
Yeah, so I think my poems tend to go kind of all over the place.
Yeah.
This the most recent book, Deed, tends to cleave a little bit more to the margin of the
Uh-huh.
page, more so than Wound from the Mouth of a Wound, where the poems are kind of going all over the page, though there's still a bit of that.
Mhm.
This poem is actually one, it took me a long time to figure out formally what I wanted to do with it, because it's structured around these. Sorry if my light is very bright.
Oh, I see.
It's
I see
structured
some
around,
stanzas, maybe 5 or 6 line stanzas,
yeah,
maybe. Yeah.
typically between 4 and 5, sometimes 6 line stanzas,
Uh-huh.
interspaced with all of these monostitches, monostitch being a 1 line stanza.
Uh-huh.
So like the first one that occurs, and when I made this line break, it felt very brave to me as someone who, I consider myself a coward about my own poems.
Yeah.
But the first one of those is a perfect pastoral, I'm sorry, as
Mm,
1 line.
mm,
And when I realized how good that was, I started trying to shape the poem around having longer stanzas and then one of these bridging monostitches, like
mm,
another kill, late fall, the foothills are ablaze. I'm very interested in the way we create meanings with the line break. And the line is an individual unit of meaning. So the kind of puzzle of this poem for me became, how can I create these pulled out lines that
Mm,
become kind of their own unit of meaning when read alone,
mm,
but then also were part of the thread of all of the rest of it?
mhm,
Kind
mhm.
of like if you've ever been sewing and somehow the distance of the two sides of the thread end up mismatched. And so in your whip stitch, you have one thread that just sticks out. I
Yeah.
wanted to kind of do something with the form of the poem that created that shape.
Wow. That's that's fascinating. Just as a final question, since we're talking about form, can you say a little bit about why you were drawn to High Bun? I'm somebody who's very into tanka and haiku, and I actually have attempted High Bun many times, but I just haven't been able to really clear the field in a way where I'm like, this is my High Bun. But I love the form. I love a lot of those forms, and just want to know what that form kind of prompted in you to not only utilize it, but then also to create this new form. I think you called it the burning. Is it the burning High Bun?
Mhm.
Which I found really fascinating and lovely. And I wondered if you could just say a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So on one level, I like the high bun because it feels like cheating. Um, because haikai forms, the tanka and renga and haiku, they're so rigorous, especially when you get into like the more dense historical requirements of like the season word,
Yeah.
the fact that you should not be telling the reader what to think or feel.
Hmm.
I think they're so fascinating when you get down into that granular level
Yeah.
that I kind of love the fact that the high one lets you cheat that a little bit because you get the prose, but you still have to, at the end of the day, write that haiku and like understand what you're doing and also be able to connect those two parts.
Mm.
The Burning High Bun came about. I was reading a couple of books, but primarily Ocean Vuong's Night Sky with Exit Wounds. And I was particularly drawn to Immigrant High Bun, which is a high bun, but it's actually multiple shorter prose poems capped off with a haiku. And then Obad with Burning City, which threads through it little fragments of the song White Christmas.
Mm.
And this got me thinking, because it's also like very much the sort of fragment of song being played over the radio as Saigon burns. This got me thinking about burning and fragmentation at the same time as I was really enamored with a multi-part Haibun. And I ended up kind of trying to put these two ideas together, utilizing erasure. The first
Mm.
one I did was it was bad. It was absolutely terrible. And ran for about 5 pages. So I put
Wow.
that away for a year, eventually came back, completely changed the topic of it. And the first burning Haibun in my book, Wound from the Mouth of a Wound, um, I ended up keeping only one line from that initial draft. And so I think a
Whoa.
lot about this is like one of my favorite moments of radical revision, because I kept the idea and one line, which became the opening line. Um, yeah, and from there, I've just, played around with different approaches. I figured out at a certain point it's much smarter to start from the haiku and then write upwards as opposed
Ah.
to writing downwards, which is what I did the first two times.
I'm gonna have to try that, like I think I'm somebody who's like, if I have an idea for something, I write 7 pages toward it, right? And then I spend like 2 years trying to filter through it, and then I'll end up with a few lines. But then you only keep that amount. But then this other way is like you're more likely to keep these other things potentially that you're building versus this other thing. But that's fascinating. The one line that you said that you kept, did you read that during the reading? Or and if you didn't, can you read that or even just repeat it? Because now I'm really curious.
Yeah, I didn't read it during this reading, but in the very first Burning High Bun, the only line I kept is the opening one. Once my mother accused me of throwing alcohol and gasoline on my emotions, which
Mm.
it's funny because I mentioned, actually I realized in two of the poems I read today, kind of the way in which like poems lie. Poems don't necessarily bear an allegiance to the truth. But that line is 100% a quote from my mother. Which I think is one
I
of the
love.
wildest things in the book, is that this is something
Yeah,
my mother said
no,
to
I
me.
really love it. And I love it as just sort of like, an opening to what you are going to be experiencing. Well, I want to thank you for spending time with us and reading your amazing work. I'm hoping that once all of this passes, we'll be able to invite you back and we can host you in person in Tucson. But it was just beautiful to hear your work, and I wish you the best on your next book. And make sure everyone, if you have an opportunity to pick up Torrin's first book, Wound from the Mouth of a Wound, and we'll be also on the lookout. Yes, there's the book. We'll also be on the lookout for your second book, Deed, which fingers crossed we'll be able to read soon. So gracias, Torrin. It was really
Thank you so
great to
much
spend
for
time with
having me.
you. Awesome. Okay, have a good night.
Too.